Hello and welcome to this tutorial on getting started writing your first quest with BetonQuest. This tutorial is designed to work with BetonQuest version 2.0, which is compatible with Minecraft server versions 1.18 and 1.19. Since we're going to be copying and pasting parts of the official tutorial on the BetonQuest wiki, we need to get that open first. I put a link in the video description that you can link to. You could also find it out on the Discord. So here in the very first tab of their Discord, there are some useful links for downloading development builds and also finding the wiki documentation, which is right here. And if it sends you to a version other than what this video is for, there's a drop down up here and you can just select the version that we're going to be on. Okay, so once you have that opened up, that's great. Let's just go ahead and minimize that and we'll come back to that. All right, the next thing we're gonna need is a server to work on where we can upload our files and test them from. In the last video, we created a folder with a server on our machines called QuestDev, and we are running a paper jar. And here are the plugins that we downloaded in the last video. You'll need a current 2.0 BetonQuest plugin jar. You'll also need a current Citizens jar and a protocol lib jar that is compatible with the version of Minecraft and BetonQuest that you are currently running. And also with Citizens, make sure that that one is compatible with the Minecraft version that you have downloaded as well. We need to then start the server with our start command or our start bat that we made in the last video. If you do not already have a server set up and you skipped the first video, you might want to go back and take a look at that. This all loaded. We didn't get any errors. There's no error messages, and it says that it is up and running. So the next thing that we need to get open is our Minecraft. Here's our QuestDev server. So go ahead and log into that. Get that up. All right, great. So next we need some place where we can actually, some files that we can actually write our quest in. So let's go to our plugins folder and find the BetonQuest option. And if we open that right now, you'll see we have the main configuration for BetonQuest itself, but inside of packages, it's empty. There's nothing in here. So let's get some tutorial sample files downloaded so that we have something to look at and get started with. The wiki that we minimized earlier, let's go ahead and pull that up and go to tutorials. And if we scroll on down, we finished setup last video. Now we're into basics. And the first thing we need to talk about is YAML, but I'm going to skip that real quick and we're going to go down to conversations, which is what we're going to be working on today. And here is a link right here that you can run either in your terminal or inside your game console to download some starting files for our quest. There's a little, you can't see it very well because it's behind it's in front of the text or behind the text, but there's a little document here. Go ahead and click on that and copy that to your clipboard. Since we're going to be going back and forth a bunch, let's resize this and put it over here. And go into your game console, or like I said, you could also paste it into your terminal, but you need to remove the slash when you do that. Let's just go ahead and put it in here and hit enter. And it says that it completed downloading those sample files for us. And now inside of your quest package folder, every quest has to have a package YAML, which is basically an index file which communicates important information about how to link together conversations and NPCs or different things within your quest. Okay, so now that we have the files downloaded, we actually need an editor tool. So let's go back to the wiki tutorial and go back up a step to the YAML that we skipped. YAML is a structured data storage format that is frequently used in config files, especially with Minecraft config files, but also for other applications use it as well. But BetonQuest uses YAML because it's easy to store data that users can read and input into in a structured format that then the application can use to process our quest details that we're putting into it. One important thing to understand about the YAML structure that is useful to BetonQuest and useful to us as Quest designers is that it uses what's called a key value format. And so the first string that you see, that is the key, and it's followed by a semicolon. And then the string after that is the value for that key. And as we're going through and connecting different events and conversations and parts of things together, it's that key that is going to help us connect all the pieces. So for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm not going to go into all the different things, ways that there are to use YAML, but it's just important as we're doing the tutorial that you are very careful to input the tutorial information just the way that it is shown in the tutorial, being careful to put in the special characters and especially indented spaces that would represent category headers and subcategory headers, and then data underneath those subcategories. So then there's just one more important thing we're missing, and that is a way to be able to input our YAML and to edit that YAML. While it is true that you could use just any old Word editing software to be able to edit your YAML, it's going to be a far easier and more productive, especially if you're new at editing YAML, to use an editing tool. And the one that BetonQuest recommends is called Visual Studio Code. And if you click this link, it will open link in a new tab. It will take you to a download site, which automatically keys into the system that you're running. If you needed a different version, you could use the drop down, but you're just going to click this link and it's going to take you to a download and start the download. And then once that's complete, you can drag that out of your downloads folder onto your desktop or someplace where you can run it. Open up the zip, and then take that application that comes out, it's a type of installer, and run the application. If you're on a Mac OS system and you're having problems opening it because it gives you an error message, something to the effect of this download is from an unknown source or developer, simply, instead of double clicking to open it, simply hold down your control key and right click on the file and then click on open. And that will bypass the Mac OS security system and allow you to open and run that file. I already have it installed. I'm just going to delete it. And so I'm going to go open it from my applications. Okay, there we go. So now we have Visual Code Studio open. So Minecraft, the terminal that's running that shows what our server is doing, our server files and folders so that we can put files in, and now we have an editor to be able to write our quest in, and we have downloaded the extra tutorial packages. Let's first open up this package YAML. So there's a couple different ways you could do that. You could right click on it and open it, tell it to open with Visual Code Studio, or you could drag it over into the workspace and it'll open it up. You see it's blank inside. So this is very limited space to work with. So during this video, I'm just going to be dragging the editor back and forth over the workspace. Right now, I need to open up the tutorial. Okay, so that finishes YAML, and we're back down to conversations, and we're ready to get started with step 1, linking a conversation to an NPC. But first, before we can link the conversation to an NPC, we have to create an NPC. So let's make an NPC. The first thing you need to do is Citizen should be downloaded, and the command to do anything with Citizens is NPC and then an argument string. So start typing in NPC, and it doesn't matter whether you click on NPC2 or NPC, both commands work. And we want to create a new NPC, and in this particular case for the tutorial, his name is going to be Jack. It will be easiest if you just name it Jack. If you want to go back later and rename it, you can, but his name's going to be used in a lot of places, and I don't want you to have to keep remembering to change the name to whatever it was you wanted to change it. Go back later and play around to your heart's content. Okay, so we're going to create Jack, and oh, look at lovely Jack. Today is all rainbow colored spots. Okay, so Jack is ID 0. If, like for instance, we had created another NPC over here, say we want to create Sarah, you'll see that her ID is 1. And so if we, now that we just created Sarah, Sarah is now active. If we were to start making NPC changes, they're going to happen to Sarah because she was the last one we worked with, but we want to be doing things with Jack. So if we come stand closer to Jack than Sarah, we can come over here and do an NPC select, and it will automatically reselect the NPC that we are standing closest to. So the first thing that the tutorial asks us to do is to create inside of package YAML this little bit of text. So we're going to copy that in there. Copy, paste. Except when we created our NPC, it didn't make Jack 1, it made Jack 0. So we're going to have to change this in here to be 0. The number that you put in here is going to always be the ID that links it to Citizen so that our quest knows which Citizen file we're going to be using. What this value is here is it is the name of the conversation file that you want to have open when the player interacts with the NPC that has the ID, in this case, ID 0. So let's quickly save our package file, and then we don't need that anymore. It's done for this particular tutorial. So next, what we need to do is open that conversation file. So drag that over or click on it, whatever you want to do. I'm going to drag this back over here so that we can see the tutorial. Okay, so the next step is to take the sample conversation here in the tutorial and copy it into our editor. So naturally, every conversation has at least two audience members. And in this particular case, it's our NPC talking with our player. So I've separated these out a little bit so we can more clearly see which are our NPC options and which are our player options. The first line here is basically the name of the section, and everything that comes after it is stuff relevant to the conversation. Other potential options up here are like events and objectives and journal. Those are section headers as well. So as long as you put all your conversation stuff within the section called conversations, then BetonQuest will be able to read it and understand what it's supposed to be. Under conversation is a section that is the name of the conversations. The next section is the name of the quester. Now, in this particular case, it does not have to match the YAML file that it is in. You could say that this is Jack and the Beanstalk if we wanted. This is the key name of the file, but this is what the player is going to see. They're going to see that Jack's name is actually Jack and the Beanstalk. Anyway, the next section is first. When the player clicks on Jack, what is the first thing Jack is going to say to the player? Because Jack, the NPC, gets to speak first. So the first thing that Jack is going to say to the player is this line right here called first greeting. So this is where the concept of a key becomes important. You could name this Jack's greeting or just greeting as long as this matches this. And then under the first greeting, we have the text that will appear to the player in that greeting. And then this thing called a pointer basically tells the conversation where it should go next. Like, what are the options that the NPC is going to give the player? And this could be one option, as we have here, or it can be multiple options. And we would just continue listing options and then listing them out here. And this one would point to this one, and this one would point to that one, and this one would point to that one. So at this point, we could test this conversation and make sure it should actually run. Except this little dot here tells us we haven't saved this file yet. So if we were to run it, it wouldn't run because it hasn't been saved. So let's do a Command S, or you can even go up to File, Save. And now you can see that it's saved because it's back, and we could then close this file. We're not going to right now. So I'm going to minimize our editor, and we have the game open here. Oh, it has not been pushed up to the game. So let's load it into the game, and that is going to be Q for quest, space, and reload. And the nice thing about BetonQuest is it gives us immediate feedback. So it was successfully reloaded. It's important at the same time that we have the terminal open. If there are errors, oftentimes it'll appear here in game, but sometimes we get extra error messages from the terminal. So anytime you upload new code into it, you should double check and make sure there weren't any error messages. Okay, so now that we've loaded that in, let's go ahead and come up to Jack and talk to him. And there's our conversation. You can see here that Jack's name is at the top. Just move this over here. You can see here's the text right here that we put in for Jack to say. And here's our pointer, says, where are you from? And it says, first, I want to know who you are. Okay, and so I think right now would be a good time to go through the controls. If there were multiple options here, you would use the movement keys to scroll between those options. So in other words, the W and the S key for forward and backwards would get you through those options. But because we don't have multiple options, you're not seeing anything happen. To select an option, which is what Jack is waiting for now, is for us to decide whether to accept his option, you hit the space bar or whatever your jump key is. So at that point, we've not given Jack anything to say to us after that. So he's basically just said, you know, he's just like, our conversation is over. You didn't tell me what to do next. So goodbye, player. And let's talk to Jack again. And this time, instead of selecting the option, let's try to just exit the conversation early because we don't want to go through the whole dialogue. So to do that, you would just hit the shift key and that exits you out of the conversation without selecting it. Now at this point, it didn't look any different either way. That's because we haven't built in options yet. So either one just basically instantly stops the conversation. Okay, so let's make this conversation a little more interesting. So drag this back over here. So you can see here in the tutorial what we're going to be adding. Let's just copy and paste this whole thing and just overwrite everything in here again. Okay, so what we added here, we had our first greeting and it pointed to where are you from. And now when the player chooses that, Jack can come back and say something else to us, and he can give us some more information. And not only that, but now the player will have two options to respond back to Jack. So let's go ahead and run that and see what happens. Remember to save your file, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of these out of our way. This time, instead of running the code from the game, let's run it directly from the terminal. So remember, when we type commands into the terminal, we don't need a slash. So the command for reloading is q reload, and we can see that there are no errors. So let's go ahead and talk to Jack again. Hello, Jack. And Jack says the same thing as before. Hello and welcome to my town, traveler. Let's go ahead and open this up and move it over here. So here we are, and we got our one option. So, and then if we use spacebar to select it, and we have two options, from a small island located east or from a big city located west. Let's go down to option 2 using the S key. You can see that now the second option is selected, and we can use the spacebar to select that. And now Jack ends the conversation and it's over with. Let's repeat the conversation real quick because I want to show you something that happened in the conversation. So we clicked on the conversation, we selected the first option, and now we're on the second conversation. And you can see right here, Jack's name is highlighted in a color. And that happened because here where it says in this text, we used a color code with Jack. And then we changed the color. This end R is changing the color code back to whatever it was originally. And so we're seeing Jack's name in the color orange, just to give you an idea of some of the things that we can do with our text. So now we know we've learned a nice little trick. We can now color code some of our conversation to make it stand out in the conversation, but we still just have a very linear quest and it just dead ends at the end. So let's make our conversation a little more complicated. Let's have some options. So what happens if we go back over to the tutorial, let's add some more conversation that brings the conversation back into one final closing. So let's copy that piece of it and overwrite everything on here. And now we've simplified the conversation and brought it back together again. And the way we're doing that is by using these pointers. So in our conversation option, the NPC gave the player two different conversation paths. And in one path, the NPC responds with one response, and in the other, he responds with a different response. But as you can see, we now have added that they both have the same pointer. They come back to the same player option in the end. And so now the player will have one single response and the conversation has come back to one thread. So let's go ahead and save that and see that working in game. And we can run the reload. And again, double checking there were no errors with our syntax. Okay, and let's go ahead and talk to Jack, right? So, hello, Jack. Yes, I am from a small island located to the east. Okay, and now it says, oh yes, I'm starving, thank you. Okay, so now let's try the other option real quick. And it gives me the food. So let's talk to Jack again. And this time we'll say, yes, I want to know who you are. And instead, let's select a big city located west. And it says the same thing. Oh yes, I'm starving, thank you. Okay, so now you can see the conversations came back together and now the conversation has ended. So now you've learned how to make a basic conversation, how to link the NPC's conversation to the player's options, and how to link it back to the NPC, how to split the conversation down two separate paths, and how to use pointers to connect those paths back together into one response that the player is given. So now that we understand that basic conversation format, the next time we can take that conversation and have some stuff happen during the conversation, what we're going to call events happen. So join me for the third tutorial, which will be covering events.